Welcome to the Harshman Travel Radio Show segment on Building Fortunes Radio with your hosts Pamela and Ron Harshman and Peter Mingles. Make sure you check us out by clicking on the Harshman Travel Radio Show link on buildingfortunesradio.com. That's www.buildingfortunesradio.com. Pam and Ron's success as entrepreneurs has allowed them to pursue their passion in the travel industry. Listen to Harshman Travel Radio Show and learn about Pam and Ron as they discover the joy that comes from being part of the travel industry. You might have a chance of working with them in their business ventures and your travel plans. So listen in and enjoy the journey. Now on to our Building Fortunes Radio Show with Pam and Ron Harshman and Peter Mingles. Let's get started, Peter.
Hello, everyone. Peter Mingles here. You're listening to us on Building Fortunes Radio. That's www.buildingfortunesradio.com. For those people unfamiliar with my voice, my name is Peter Mingles, and we own this radio show station. I am proud to say that when we first got started, I was looking for some guest hosts, and one of the first people that I reached out to was Pam Harshman, because we were just starting a conversation with Pam starting to say that she was going to do something with travel, and she was going to be a certified travel agent. And I said, wow, that's really great. A lot of people in the home-based business arena that do travel are proud card-carrying members, which usually means they pay a certain amount and they can have some of the benefits of being a travel, but they really never learn the profession. And I said, that'll be good, Pam, because I know you always study your industry and your trade, and you're always really good at whatever you touch, and you'll always be very attentive to your customers, and I want to make sure that our Building Fortunes Radio listening audience always has access to somebody that can help them with travel, because people that do home-based businesses and are in this industry, they travel a lot for events. They travel a lot because it's part of their dreams. They travel a lot because they're regular people too, and they have vacations that they take. And I said, this would be great, so why don't we do this? We're going to set up a regular spot for you on Building Fortunes Radio, and we did, and we call it Harshman Travel Radio. So if you go to buildingfortunesradio.com and then you look for the Harshman Travel, you'll be able to find it there. And we always like to promote her regular website, harshmantravel.com. harshmantravel.com. And Pam does a great job with the newsletter. And then what we found was Ron was going to be helping as well. Now, Ron Harshman was a man of many words, I thought. Not. Like, he didn't talk. Like, he never talked at all. I'd call Pam and I'd say, hey, hello, Mr. Harshman, or hi, Ron, this is Peter. Is Pam there? He's like, yep, there you go. And I was like, okay. I think that was a complete sentence. So he was like, he was just nice and polite, and he just kind of like a little bit like the butler. Here he is. And he would pass over the phone to Pam, and we'd have a nice conversation. Then when we started to do this, I found out a lot about his background, and as you'll hear a little bit later, you can find out a lot about his background as well. And as two very highly respected professionals in many arenas, they really do a great job for us on handling anything related to travel and travel needs and travel news on Building Fortunes Radio on the Harshman Travel Radio Show segment. So you can sign up for the newsletter, and if you go on the graphics, like the photo gallery, you'll be able to see some really cool pictures that they take together. So most of them are Ron, and usually some kind of a furry friend. So they so there's cool stuff there. And occasionally you'll see a picture of Pam there too, but she's usually the one behind the camera. So thanks for being here, Pam. Over to you first.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for being here. Nice to be here again tonight.
That's right.
Yeah, a little bit about my background, and just to throw in there, it's always nice on Friday nights. We actually look forward to this. It gives us a chance to spread the word, I guess. Anyway, a little about my background is I started my working years in law enforcement as a 911 dispatcher, moved up the ladder to court administration, and did that for many years up in the Pacific Northwest. Then Ron and I got together, and I moved down to be with him here in Florida, and had kind of a culture shock, not just the weather, but the whole circumstances with this great big move I made, one of which I could not transfer laterally in any way, shape, or form. I would have to start off at the bottom in my career, and that wasn't going to fly with me. So I was looking for something that would give me more independence, possibly work from home, and I ended up getting my realtor's license followed by my broker's license. Sold real estate in the Fort Lauderdale area for many years, and I kind of got burned out on that. I think it was too much driving for my liking, but ended up after that getting my life and health insurance license and sold Medicare supplements, visiting with the senior population in their homes. Absolutely loved it. I love sitting down and talking to old people, and I say that tongue-in-cheek because that old people is getting younger all the time, let me tell you. Anyway, that's when I started seeing all the home-based businesses, MLMs, coming across my Facebook news feed, and I have to admit I took a bite out of a few of them, and some winners, some losers, but ultimately it was kind of, well, I met you. That was a good thing, too. But it just wasn't exactly what I was looking for. I almost felt kind of like a gypsy. But then a friend introduced me to the travel industry. Now, Ron and I are both baby boomers. We are empty nesters, and we had been talking about doing some more traveling ourselves and just kind of finagling our schedules around. It was still in the planning stage. But then when I was introduced into travel, it was like, oh, dear, the lights were going on and flashing, and I was so excited to get home that night, and we sat down and we talked about it. And like most things that we do, once we sit and discuss it, we start doing some research and weighing the pros and the cons, and we just both started getting more and more excited because it seemed like this was great. This was a good opportunity, and we ended up jumping in both feet and getting all the education that we could, and it has been an absolute wonderful experience. We've done a lot more traveling ourselves. We've been helping people right and left and enjoying it thoroughly. And we haven't looked back. We're just looking so into the future and having a wonderful time.
Excellent. Well, perfect. Then we're going to go over to Ron. So, Ron, more about you.
All righty, sir. Good to be here. And you see, you've had to pay dearly because of all the scarcity of words during those years when you were talking to Pam. Now you put me on the radio and I don't shut up. But anyhow, my background is very different than Pam's. I spent many, many years as a licensed clinical psychologist and was very heavily involved in the actual nuts and bolts of the profession. Very involved in the legislative area, the administrative area, sat on the board of directors of the Canadian Psychological Association, and represented Canada with the American Association, sat on several ethics boards and professional affairs committees, so was very heavily involved in making sure that things were being done correctly and making sure that, I was very involved in that whole process of having a profession that was doing things the right way. In terms of my clinical side, I was likewise very heavily involved in getting extremely strong experience and background when I actually started in my bachelor's program way back. I had a supervisor who made it very clear to me that if I wanted to have a good career in psychology, there were two important things that I was going to have to do. One was to make sure that I did all my schooling at different institutions with different professors, different orientations, different trains of thought. So I had to do all of my degrees at different places, and I did that, and he was correct. It was very, very helpful to get that broad-based knowledge. And secondly, he said to do the same thing in terms of clinical experience. So basically, when I came out of school, I started working for pretty much each and every one of the social service delivery systems and got experience working with pretty much every possible clinical population, from disturbed kids to corrections to drug and alcohol, et cetera, and eventually ended up in private practice, doing a lot of specialty work, again, working with young families, doing a lot of marital counseling, a lot of sexual counseling, a lot of, unfortunately, it was good to do premarital, but it was not so good doing pre-divorce and post-divorce counseling. But that was many years ago, and at the time that I got involved in that, there was a major transformation happening in the whole world of divorce and legal process, because up until that time, Peter, the legal profession, both in Canada and here in the States, had incorrectly adopted a preconceived idea that if there was a young family involved in a divorce action and there were young children involved, the best thing would be for mommy to have custody and daddy to have visitation. And at that time, there was an awful lot of research coming out, both in the legal arena and in the mental health arena, clearly indicating that that was a very incorrect and, in fact, harmful orientation. So, make a long story short, there was a very strong movement, again, folks, it started in Canada, moved very quickly to the States, where in the legal arena, there were laws passed and procedures put in place that basically said that in any case of disputed custody, the primary concern of the court had to be the psychological best interests of the children, as opposed to just black and white, kids to mommy, visits to daddy. So that created a whole new, basically almost a new profession, because obviously people in the legal profession, lawyers, judges, court people, etc., were not trained, didn't have the experience, didn't have the knowledge, and quite frankly didn't have the interest in doing the necessary background investigations to be able to come close to making any determination about what would be in the psychological best interests of young children. So what that meant was that the legal arena had to, basically marry mental health and bring in mental health professionals into the court system as independent practitioners, but as experts for the court, not attached to mommy's lawyer or daddy's lawyer, not coming in as a hired gun, but really to accurately and appropriately assess the situation, interview all the necessary people involved, whether it be the kids, the parents, the kids with the parents, next-door neighbors, relatives, teachers, counselors, rabbis, priests, ministers, family members, etc., and then be able to come into court with very solid recommendations as to what would be in the psychological best interests of the children. And it was a whole new approach, and I was fortunate enough to be pioneering that whole area up in Canada. And in Canada, the Divorce Act is a piece of federal legislation, so all divorces are heard at the Supreme Court level, which made it much more organized, much more formalized, and much more standardized in terms of what had to happen, in those court cases. And I was one of the first mental health professionals to be appointed by the Supreme Court to basically represent the best interests of the children involved, and handled up there probably close to, or maybe even a little bit more than 200 cases of disputed custody actions. Did a lot of guest lecturing at the Faculty of Law in the university, and also did a lot of training of other psychologists at psychological conventions, because, again, this was a whole new area, and there were many practitioners who knew absolutely nothing about being a an expert witness or what happened in court or how to handle oneself or how to do the investigations, etc. So it was very challenging, very rewarding. By chance, I was visiting with some friends down in South Florida, and they introduced me to a good friend of theirs who is a forensic psychiatrist doing an awful lot of criminal forensic work in the South Florida courts. And he was extremely interested and impressed with what I was doing up in Canada, basically asked me to give up my practice in Canada, move down to Florida to go into practice with him. He would continue doing all of the criminal forensic work, and he wanted me to basically develop a civil forensic approach in the South Florida courts. So it was a very good opportunity. I took advantage of it. I moved down to South Florida, and I was the first mental health professional to ever be appointed by the courts in both Dade and Broward counties to represent the psychological best interests of children involved in disputed custody cases. Did that for a number of years. After that, I ended up going out to California, working with another psychiatrist with whom I had worked for many, many years. He was responsible or had a very, very large and famous international training institute where they were training all areas of mental health professionals, psychiatrists, social workers, psychologists, marriage and family counselors, addiction counselors, etc. And he asked me to come out to California and take over as executive director of that institute and oversee all of the training that was going on worldwide. So, again, it was an excellent opportunity, and I took advantage of that, was there for a number of years. Did not particularly like living in South California, so moved back to Florida, and for a very short period of time got involved in the managed mental health care arena because that's what was going on at that time. It did not take me long to get thoroughly disgusted with what I saw going on because it was very clear to me that they were calling it managed care, but in essence it was managed money. The insurance companies were only concerned with how to handle cases in as inexpensive a way as possible. Got thoroughly disgusted with that. Ended up going to the Florida Department of Insurance and working with them and putting together new legislation that would regulate the entire field of managed mental health. And did that, and again was very pleased and felt good with what I was able to accomplish there. Shortly after that, as a result of my involvement with the Department of Insurance, got involved in doing some consulting with insurance companies regarding Medicare supplements. And after doing that for a number of years, Pam and I decided to move to Southwest Florida. We were in Southeast Florida. And semi-retire, we started raising alpacas. As Pam mentioned, she got involved in the home-based business arena, and I was not at all interested in that, but I was fully supportive of her, even to the point of, as you say, being the butler, saying, hold on, she's right here. And it was very good for a while. When she came home and said that she really wanted to talk about us getting into the travel industry, that was something that really grabbed me, and we talked about it. As Pam said, we did a lot of research and realized that if we were going to do it, we had to do it the right way. We were going to get properly credentialed and go through all the coursework and get licensed and all that stuff. But even more important, we realized that we had to find those travel vendors with whom we could work and that we felt good about representing and promoting. So we did that, and we've had a blast. We've coordinated with a number of vendors that we feel very comfortable with, continually upgrading our own knowledge and experience and training. And as Pam said, we've been having a blast. We've been doing a lot more travel than we could have done otherwise. And as usual, I've gone way over time, so I will shut up.
We're doing just fine. We're going to run into bonus times, so don't worry about that for those people listening in. If you call in on the phone and we run over, which we often do, you don't have to worry about it. We can pick it up on the other side. Oh, I'm sorry. If you're listening on the phone, you stay on. If you're listening in online, then you can always pick it up when we put the recordings on buildingfortunesradio.com. We're going to take a little commercial break. We'll be right back.
You've been listening to the Harshman Travel Radio Show on Building Fortunes Radio with your hosts Pam and Ron Harshman and Peter Mingle. This special segment can be heard again with almost any device connected to the internet by going to buildingfortunesradio.com. That's www.buildingfortunesradio.com. Listen in often and get to know Pam and Ron. Go to the buildingfortunesradio.com website to listen in to the show. No matter where you're at in life, you can benefit by listening to and by working with Pam and Ron. Let them book your next cruise, vacation getaway, or group event. Listen to Harshman Travel Radio and witness their ability to pursue their dreams in the field they love. Thanks for listening. And now, back to the Harshman Travel Radio Show.
And we are right back with Peter Mingles, that's me, and then Pam and Ron Harshman, and Ron always gives us some updates of what's happening in the travel industry. So over to you, Ron.
Thank you, sir. Some interesting things going on this week, Peter, that I wanted to talk about. Some things that have really been a bit of a surprise is to look and see how some of the cruise lines are really, really becoming very exotic in some of the offers that they're coming up with. As we have talked about before on this show, there are many, many brand new ships coming on board. There's 3 major ones coming in within the next few months that I want to spend a bit of time just addressing because they're so different, but they are so indicative of what's happening in the cruise industry. But in addition to that, we have seen some offers from the different cruise lines that are just mind-blowing. For example, we've got our cruise going to Alaska in late September. We're the last cruise going to Alaska this year. And we booked a number of staterooms when we started out with forming this group, almost a year ago. We have sold most of our inventory. We still have a very, very limited number of cabins left. But what the cruise line does is, as you get closer to the date of the cruise, anything that's unsold in the group inventory that's reclaimed by the cruise line, because at this point the rates for that cruise are significantly higher than the ones that we have locked in. So just to give you an example of how the cruise lines work with us, we still have a limited number of staterooms. We would hope to be able to move them out before the cruise and before the cruise line recaptures them. But with our staterooms that are left, we still have the contracted original rates and the amenities, and those are locked in. So even though the cabins right now are going for significantly more than we are locked in at, and when I say significantly more, I'm talking $500-600 a person more right now. But in order to help us move out the rest of our inventory, our business development manager said, look, why don't we run a special for the next couple of weeks? Anybody who books one of your cabins, one of your remaining cabins during the next 2 weeks, we will throw in an extra $50 onboard credit to go along with all the other amenities you have. So that was one thing they helped us with. And then they came out this weekend. It actually starts today and it ends Friday. They have a $1 deposit per person. $1 per person, you can reserve your stateroom, and you don't have to pay your final, payment until the middle of June. So anybody who's looking for a cruise, whether it be our cruise to Alaska or any other cruise on Norwegian Cruise Lines, they can book it this weekend until Monday midnight for, instead of $250 a person deposit, $1, and that locks in your stateroom for your cruise, and you don't pay in full for the cruise until you're much closer to your travel date. So that was something that we found really very, very interesting and certainly very helpful. So obviously we're doing a lot of advertising for that cruise this weekend. But one of the other things that I wanted to talk about, and this just came out, is that there are 3 major new ships coming on board this spring, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about each of them because they're so different, but like I said before, they're so indicative of what's happening in the cruise industry. First one I'll talk about is Royal Caribbean's Symphony of the Seas. This is the largest cruise ship ever. So I think that their capacity is something like 6,000. They have water slides, race cars. They're basically bringing on so many different things, from the 3 ships. But talking about the Symphony of the Seas, as I said, this is the largest one. It debuts in late March, and they have an ultimate abyss slide. They've got the perfect storm. They've got a redesigned boardwalk neighborhood featuring their famous sports bar and arcade. They've got their bar. They've got classic arcade games. They've got a large sports TV, craft beer, some pub grub. They are starting in the Mediterranean. They're going to have Mediterranean itineraries in the spring and summer from Barcelona, and then they head to Miami, where they will start with their Caribbean itineraries. Then you go to Carnival Cruise Lines. They have a brand new ship called the Horizon. It's coming out in mid-April, and it's featuring a high-in-the-sky sky ride, as well as Sky Course rope course, IMAX movie theater, and, of course, their popular Guy's Burger Joint and Red Frog Rum Bar, Blue Guana Tequila Bar, and all kinds of different restaurants. They are talking about having a far range of craft beers all day, feature live music every night, and they are also starting in the Mediterranean, and then they will be heading across the Atlantic to New York City. And from New York, they will be going to Bermuda, 4-day cruises, and 8-night Caribbean cruises, and then they, too, end up in Miami. It's funny how everybody comes to Miami, and they're going to be doing 8-night Caribbean cruises starting in September. And then the third one, and certainly our favorite one, is the Norwegian Bliss. That's the one we're taking to Alaska. And it is very, very different. It has a 2-level, nearly 1,000-foot-long electric go-kart racetrack with speeds up to 30 miles an hour. They've got an open-air laser tag course. And
that looked awesome.
Yeah, on the Bliss, the course is themed as an abandoned space station, will be open during the day and into the night. On the outer decks will be a large aqua park featuring 2 water slides and a kids' splash area. The ship's waterfront, the waterfront area is featuring the Breakaway and Breakaway Plus ships, and they will have an outside space for 13 restaurants and bars. They've got, as we've talked before, the Jersey Boys will headline their main theater. And again, they are starting in April. They're going to be up in Alaska. We are on the last cruise up in Alaska, the end of September. From there, the very next day, we get back on the 29th of September. On the 30th, they head down to California, and they will be, doing the Caribbean out of Miami, starting in November, and in March, they go back up to New York City. So it's just so interesting for me to see the different cruise lines, the different ships, the different itineraries that are available, and it makes it so much easier to explain to people that regardless of what they're looking for in a vacation, if we talk about cruises, there is a cruise for everybody, and part of our responsibility as professional travel consultants is to make sure that we know enough about our client so that we can pick the right cruise line, the right ship, the right itinerary, the right amenities to make their their vacation everything they want it to be. And just as an aside, I don't want to spend a lot of time going into this, and this is something, Peter, that I believe you have a friend who's involved in this area, but one of the things that I just got in was all of the new descriptions of the Holy Land travel plans for 2018 and 2019. So there's so much going on in the travel industry. I mean, you talk about cruises and you talk about, the Mediterranean or, going to Bermuda or Hawaii or Alaska. Pam and I are now talking with Norwegian about our next 2 group cruises. One will be on the brand new ship that they have coming out even after the Bliss. There's a brand new ship that's coming out called the Encore, and that will be cruising the Caribbean out of Miami. So we will definitely have a group on that brand new ship. And then in early 2020, because that will be 2019, I'm sorry, then in 2020, we will be looking at the Panama Canal. So you've got all these different cruise opportunities, but you also have so many other areas to go and different kinds of vendors, whether it's faith-based tours, whether it's all-inclusive resorts. As I mentioned last time, a lot of the areas in the Caribbean are now coming back full strength. Mexico, there are many, many areas of Mexico that have been deemed to be perfectly safe, and obviously a number of the resorts there are working very hard with tremendous specials and offers for people to take advantage of. So, as we've said before, we as travel agents have a commitment to basically try out ourselves as much as we can so that when we talk to clients or potential clients, we can talk from personal experience. But it's also so important for us to realize that regardless of what somebody's looking for, whether it's a quick weekend getaway or they want to plan years in advance for their 50th anniversary. One of the couples going with us to Alaska, for example, is going to be celebrating their 60th anniversary, and they have some of their family members going on the cruise with them, and we're arranging for a specialty dining experience for them celebrating their 60th anniversary. So even if it's something that people are planning way in advance or something that they want to do, very offhand, quick, just easy going, run away for a few days, we want to be able to respond to anybody's wishes and wants and needs, and it gives us great pleasure to have people go on vacation and come back and say, it went perfectly, and we are certainly going to be in touch with you when it's time to plan our next one. So that's our goal. And I've gone over.
Cool.
Thank you.
Excellent. There we go. But excellent information. So for those people that are wondering, you can save money, actually, when you book through, obviously, the travel agent. Some people think sometimes that by booking through a travel agent, they're going to actually pay extra commissions themselves. And that's just not true. So you can get special deals. You can get special services. You can find things that you probably wouldn't be able to find on your own and not pay any more money and get the special services, especially when you need them. So that's why we have Harshman Travel here on our radio show. So having said all of that, I think we're done. Thanks so much for those people that are listening in live, and we're going to post this to Building Fortunes Radio. You go to buildingfortunesradio.com, and then you can do a search for Harshman Travel, or you can just do buildingfortunesradio.com/Harshman Travel, and you'll be able to hear the previous radio shows that we've done as well. So on that note, thanks everybody for listening in, and we're going to catch you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good week. Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Harshman Travel Radio Show segment on Building Fortunes Radio with your hosts Pam and Ron Harshman and Peter Mingles. Be sure to check out the BuildingFortunesRadio.com website to hear previous radio shows with Pam and Ron Harshman and Peter Mingles. Pam and Ron's success as entrepreneurs has allowed them to pursue their passion in the travel industry. Listen to Harshman Travel Radio Show and learn about Pam and Ron as they discover the joy that comes from being part of the travel industry. It's been our privilege to have you listen in. Pam and Ron Harshman and Peter Mingles and I want to say thanks for listening and ask you to spread the word, tell a friend, join our newsletter, and go make a difference in your world.